So with regard to the appeals this month, we actually have a lot to go through, and in fact, all of them having been dismissed, which is quite unusual. You normally have a couple of approvals in there, so that's quite interesting. I'll go through them as quickly as I can, but if there's any questions along the way, it's probably easier if you ask at the time rather than at the end, because there's quite a few. So the first one is an application which was for a conservatory to the front of the property, Apple Tree Cottage, Bridgestow. It's an interesting one because, in essence, when you... so this is the location, sorry, I'll just show you where it is, in Bridgestow, the red line is around there. This is the house where the proposed extension, the proposed front extension was proposed along the front elevation here. This is the proposal, this little bit here, which when you, at first appearance, you might think, well, that's all right, isn't it? It's just a small addition to the front. However, the history to this site is the important thing here. The application, the original building was as a barn. So the character of that barn was key, really, in the officers' consideration. I think one of the really helpful things with this, and something that I think our officers have learnt, because we've had previous situations where something is a non-designated heritage asset, and in the past, inspectors have said the officer conclusion on that basis needed to be supported by evidence. In this case, the officer found the tithe maps and the original OS maps, and also found the farmstead being identified on the historic environment record, and as such could identify that it had a really interesting and a successful historic reference. I think having done that in terms of the officer, it helped to influence the decision of the inspector, and he indicated that it would be jarringly at odds with the very simple facade and the timber windows, and would harm the character and appearance of the former barn and its significance as a heritage asset. He did give some weight in his decision to the benefits of the proposal, such as weatherproofing, security, thermal efficiency, but those matters, in his view, did not outweigh the harm. It's quite a small scheme, but interesting response. The second application is East Bowland Farm. The application was for the erection of a new stable and an arena for horses with associated landscaping. Again, this application was dismissed. I'll just show you the site. So this is East Bowland here, and there's an access route up, and this is the space where they wanted to put the sand school arena and a stable. I've just got a couple of images of this is the proposed sand school, and this is where the stable is proposed, and these are the elevations of the stable shown there. In this case, the inspector identified the effect of the development, the main issue as the effect of the development on the character and appearance of the area, and whether the proposed development leads to intensification of the overall site. In terms of the character and appearance, he indicated that the works were proposed on an undeveloped part of the wider site, and as such further spread the built form and hard standing into the open countryside. The construction of the sand school and stable, when considered with the other existing development within the wider site, increased the scale of built development in a manner which is detrimental to the character and appearance of the countryside. And he also considered that it would be contrary to the JLP policies and also the neighbourhood plan. With regard to intensification, it was an interesting debate about whether this type of development would be intensification, but in the end he came down to the view that it would intensify development in in that area and consequently harm the character and appearance of the area. So that was that one. So the next one, land adjacent to Troubadour Barn, High Loughton, Bondley, change of use of land to garden to include the installation of 18 PV panels and the erection of a shed, plant room, greenhouse and shepherd's hut. So it's quite a wide, varied type of development. This is the location plan. This is a zoomed in version. And on the plan, you can see these are the solar panels, greenhouse, plant room. Oh no, that's solar panels. These are the raised beds, sorry. They look a bit like solar panels. Raised beds there and the shepherd's hut here. So it's quite a large piece of land with various bits of development dotted around it. This is an image of the proposed shepherd's hut. The main issue here is whether the site is a suitable location for the proposed development, having regard to the development plan and the character and appearance of the area. As an aside, it is a loss of grade 3 agricultural land, of which we don't have lots. So that was something which was raised in the planning officer's reason for refusal, but the inspector gave this limited weight. He didn't feel that that was a decisive matter. But he did agree with the officer that it was an isolated location following the Bramshill judgment, and so wasn't contrary to part 1 of the policy TTV 26, which talks about isolated development. But he felt also that it would introduce a dispersed collection of overly domestic features across quite a large area, and he felt that it would urbanise, because of the way that the proposals laid out, it would urbanise the landscape. And in relation to biodiversity, there was an interesting comment in that he said that that the applicant had identified that they would be looking to plant new species to support biodiversity, but he just felt that the amount of development proposed for the site was not acceptable and would harm the character and appearance of the area. Next one is Summerhays, Ingley Green, Broadwood Kelly. Outline planning application with some matters reserved for the erection of a supervisory dwelling. This was also dismissed. This one focused really on, this is location Summerhays there. That was the only plan that was submitted with it. So there was a pre-app with this one, which is useful for you to know, in that when the pre-app came in, they were discouraged because it was felt to be too large and that there was no essential need demonstrated, and again on agricultural grade 3 land, and in whilst it was not isolated, it was an unsustainable location. And so the inspector decided the main issue was whether the appeal site would be an appropriate location for new housing, and whether it would be promoting sustainable patterns of development. One of the interesting things is in policy TTV 26 requires development in the countryside to justify itself either from an agricultural, a forestry, or an essential occupational need. And in this case, the applicant had a joinery business on the site, and argued that it was essential that they lived on site, and the inspector concluded that there was no evidence that the needs of the business required a countryside location in the first place, or indeed that it required the owner to be present 24 hours a day. And the other concern he had was that that the occupiers would be likely to be almost totally reliant on the private car, because there were no real public transport services available, and there was no pavements to Winkley, which I think is about a mile away on the road. So So he agreed that it wasn't isolated, but maintained that the principle of sustainable development were not met. That was quite an interesting one in terms of TTV 26 and the isolated development. So the next one is Hawley House, Church Road High, Hampton. It was an outline application with all matters reserved for residential development of up to 19 dwellings to include public open space. It was a resubmission of a previous application which was refused. This is the site, so the access to the site is down here, and this is the site of the proposal. This is the indicative layout. It wasn't. It was for indicative purposes, but it was used in the decision that the inspector made. So, the application was refused because it would not be compatible with the character and townscape of the area, lack of drainage information, and lack of provision of appropriate Section 106 contributions.